How's it going, everyone? Welcome back to the Blue Shifting. Welcome back to pain and sorrow and fear and death and it's gonna be bad. So, we're pretty screwed. The girls are absolutely conspiring. They're toying with us, and he's like trying to avoid it, but like they're not gonna let him avoid it. And I don't know how it's all gonna play out, but it got to the point where he's like so concerned about his own safety, he kind of like left a note about what's happening in his room and tried to like tell his parents like, hey, take care of my favorite clock if something happens to me, which would be a horrifying thing to hear from your kid, right? Like, holy crap, like what do you even do as a parent? Like probably get him in counseling or something, but yeah, so that doesn't sound good. And then we're going to be just kind of moving forward, playing it out and seeing what happens next. But it's not looking good. I was hoping there was a sliver of a chance that he might be able to just roll with the punches and just kind of be okay. But I don't see that happening. So, yeah. Oh, well, let's see how this goes. Let's see what happens next. I think we're in chapter 11 now. This is the first time I'd ever woken with such clarity. It was 5:59, just moments before my alarm would go off. I was amazed at the precision of my internal clock. I had made preparations for the next day of school before I went to bed. I changed quickly, descended to the deserted lower floor. I appeared that my mom was still asleep. Neither breakfast nor lunch was ready. Yesterday, I just unilaterally declared that I would be leaving early today, so it couldn't be helped. I slathered jam on some bread and topped it with instant cocoa. And just as I was finishing up breakfast, Mom rose groggily from her slumber.
あら、ケイチ、今日は早いのね。学校の行事か何か？
別に。
Answering bluntly, I picked up my bag and stood after stuffing 2 slices of bread down my throat.
もう行くの？お弁当は？もうちょっと待ってくれないとできないわよ。
If I waited for her to make lunch, then it would end up being the same time as usual. If I did that, it would raise the chances of me running into Ren and me on the way. Yeah, from today onwards, I was going to go to school alone.
今日はいいよ。
じゃあお昼はどうするの？
抜け出して商店で菓子パンでも買うよ。
そう。じゃあこれ、お昼代ね。
Oh man, if his mom wasn't freaking out before, she'll be freaking out now. Talking about suddenly passing away, changing his habits suddenly, like those are warning signs of like self-harm.
ちゃんとレシート持ってくるのよ。
I took the 1,000 yen bill from Mom and slipped it into my pocket.
こんなに早いけど、レナちゃんたちもこんなに早いの？
いや、俺だけ。
レナちゃんには早く出るって伝えてあるの？
I have no reason to tell her every little detail, now do I? Finding it difficult answering that onslaught of questions, I made an annoyed face.
レナが来たら、ケイチは先に行ったって伝えてよ。
ちょっとケイチ、待ちなさい。
It's not that I didn't trust my parents. I just couldn't rely on them. They couldn't help me. I could only hope that they didn't get involved. It was safer that way. It's not your call to make, dude. My mom's annoyed voice was cut off by the slam of the door. For the first time since I moved here, I headed down the road to school alone. Yeah, no. I get why he's not telling his parents, but that's the wrong move. Even if they don't believe him, just talking about it is a good idea. Up until now, I'd always walked down the same path at the same time each day. So I always met with the same people in the same places. But today was different. I didn't meet the people I would normally, and nobody was at the place where I would normally have met them. Of course, Rena wasn't in the spot we usually meet, and there wasn't anyone at the spot where we normally meet up with me on. The length of the trees' shadows, the morning air, the brightness of the sun, it was a completely different type of morning from what I was used to. Without a doubt, it felt strange. It left me with an impression that I destroyed the illusion Hinamizawa had set up for me before I had enough time to prepare all the props needed to deceive me.
あら、ケイチ君。今朝は早いわね。みんなで早朝から待ち合わせ？
The person who called out to me was someone who always passed by as we were taking a walk along the edge of the fields. Their name was, I forget. Of course, this wasn't the spot where we usually passed each other.
今朝は早くに目が覚めちゃったので、気分転換なんです。あまり気にしないでください。
I threw out a random excuse.
レナちゃんやミオンちゃんはどうしたんだい？今日は一人なの？
ええ、まあ。
I was being asked the same type of questions my mom was asking. So I answered them in the same uninterested, vague manner. It wasn't funny being asked where Rena was each time I passed by someone, but maybe it was to be expected. It was because it's so long, we were always together so amicably. Yeah, and there was also like this pretty clear budding like potential romance between the two of you, and in a small town that like means a lot, and so like I'm sure everyone was rooting for him and cheering for him. So even if, barring the whole conspiracy thing, it's not that unreasonable that a small town people would be like, hey, why aren't you hanging out with like your best friends? Because like everyone knows each other here. So it's not unreasonable. But especially when you're feeling like threatened and paranoid, it would just come off as like really like nosy. Even I felt like I let my guard down. We could still be Stop it, Keiichi. Don't think about that anymore. You spent all day yesterday thinking about how dangerous it was to go soft, didn't you? Beep, beep. A car horn blared from out of nowhere. Even though I was walking, lost in thought, the horn was way too close. A mechanical behemoth barreled at me from behind, catching me completely off guard. By the time I turned around, the van's hulking chassis was almost on top of me. I'd seen plenty of cars veer in the opposite shoulder to avoid pedestrians, but this car is doing the opposite. It's veering into you? Felt like there was someone on the opposite shoulder and the van was swerving in my direction to avoid them. That blissfully ignorant train of thought delayed me from realizing something much, much more important. That large mass was hurling right at me. Was it going to hit me? The inside of my head instantly flooded with a painfully cold liquid. In that moment, the scene before me, no, time itself had frozen. In the silence that frozen moment, I compared the van so close that I had no way to dodge it, and my body, the upper half, twisted awkwardly in order to look behind me. There was no way I could dive out of the way in my current position. If I lost focus now, this moment would have paused, and I would probably be plowed over, caught in this silly pose. Bend my upper body toward the padding by the side of the road. If I bent far enough, I'd get away just being hit by the side view mirror. As soon as the thought crossed my mind, the temporal stasis was shattered by the deafening sound of the van. The side of the mirror struck my shoulder, sending me spinning off through the air like a top locked in my contorted position. Kaplash. I sent tumbling through the air. I crashed into the muddy patty on the side of the road. My entire body was soiled and drenched. But the choice I'd made in that instant was unmistakably for the best. I was covered in mud, but when the alternative was being hit by a car, it was the closest I could be to being unscathed. Rising from the patty, I had enough of me to glare over the stopped van and yell profanities at the driver. I'm not sure if he was able to see me, but the van sped off suddenly. Yeah, that seems too intentional. I couldn't help but continue yelling out profanities. The disgrace from being covered in mud hurt more than any physical wounds. I slogged through the muddy patty and made my way back onto the road. I'll track you down and sue you. If I go looking for a van, I'm sure to find it in this little village. The path I was on had rice paddies on either side and had been so narrow one car could barely fit through. It wasn't a place you tear up full speed down in a car, let alone pass by pedestrians. Not only was it a narrow road, but the car just now was closer to my side of the road than the other when it went past me. Even as I cursed, I was just desperately trying to suppress the dark cloud roiling up within me. This wasn't a hit and run. That car just now was trying to run me over, wasn't it? Thinking back, I did feel like there'd been a car creeping up on me slowly for a while. That's right. As soon as I'd parted ways with that person taking a walk, I had a feeling the whole time. If I'd wanted it past me, then I had no shortage of chances. Normally, I would have felt suspicious and turned around sooner. But I was lost in thought, and now I was kicking myself for not realizing it was there sooner. And then, when the path became narrow and there was no end in sight, he had floored it. If he had hesitated for even a moment, the results would have been no laughing matter. As the adrenaline rush from nearly being run over subsided and the realization of just how terrifying the preceding events were sunk in, there was no doubt about it. The van was intentionally trying to hit me. A cold, vicious sweat seeped from my scalp and slid down my back before dribbling off. See, this is where, like, you call Oishi and at least say, hey, I think someone tried to run me over. I don't know. Like, yeah, I guess you probably couldn't do anything about that. I struggled to avoid falling into a panic. There was still the possibility this was just an accident. Calm down, Keiichi. But also don't be naive, Keiichi. Being that lax will get you killed next time. You need to always be on your toes. Don't give them any openings. If my enemy was really out to kill me, the next time they would use a more reliable method. That time came and I was acting like I was now. Getting covered in mud was the price I had to pay for my own naivete. Covered in mud without an injury. Not even a sprain. I guess this is what you could call a silver lining. I began walking again, this time cautiously. I wouldn't even show a hint of carelessness. I had suspected only Ren and the others up until now. No, it was because I'd suspected them that I believed that there were no other enemies. Oishi-san had said so, didn't he? There was the possibility of a village conspiracy. Was I really mired so deeply in the situation that I had no choice but to try and carry on as usual? Wouldn't it be safest just to hole up in my house? But the moment I abandoned my regular routine, everyone around me would abandon theirs as well. That was just too horrifying of a thought. I recall the tales of Oishi-san told me when Hinamizawa was still called Onikakushi. The frightening tale of an entire village of demons hunting their prey, surrounding them and eating them alive. One must not interfere with the demons. One must pretend not to see it. The enemies were numerous, the whole village. The villagers, with their unwavering faith in the curse, would do nothing to help me. The strong sudden flash of sunrise sign made me slightly dizzy. Ugh. I had no idea what was going on anymore. When I suspected it was the work of men, I would catch a glimpse of Oyashiro-sama's curse. And when I suspected it was Oyashiro-sama's curse, someone would poke their head out. What was coincidence? What was intentional? Who was my enemy and who was just a bystander? Know what I really truly wanted was to know was, how did I end up with this proverbial bullseye painted on my back? Eventually, an answer in the form of I could understand will appear. I don't care when that will happen. Because until then, it cannot die. I mean, it was when you started talking to outsiders. It's when you started talking to the police. As soon as you did that, and it was observed, it was reported. And as soon as it was reported, you were seen as the enemy. That's all. If you literally did not ask questions and never talk to the police officer, I don't think any of this would be happening to him. That alone fueled my resolve to fight and will keep me alive. Well, I guess there's also the idea that Rena might be trying to find a different target other than herself and her family. I remembered seeing the metal bat in the gym storage shed, but there was a padlock on the door barring my entry. At the very least, I wanted to get my hands on it before everyone else arrived at school. I circled around the school grounds impatiently. But all I could find were things like lumber, nothing I could bring into the classroom easily. Then I had an epiphany. I should search inside the classroom. If it was something in the classroom to begin with, then there wouldn't be a problem. I could tell that everyone's indoor shoes are still in their lockers. Good thing I came early. Nobody else was here yet. I wondered, what could I find in the classroom? I didn't think I could find an especially effective weapon like a bat, but it couldn't be helped at this point. Until the gym storage shed was open, I needed to find a substitute. A lingering hint of naivete whispered that there was no way I'd be attacked at school, but such soft ideas would no longer protect me. To think that they were slowly making their way into parts of my life that I had once thought impenetrable. In the worst case, my own house might not be safe anymore. That was an incredibly frightening thought. But I believed that not considering the worst case scenario would be even more frightening. Anyway, I will survive. So long as I live, then I'll definitely be able to escape this labyrinth of nonsense. Definitely. Man, just leave. Move away. My exploration of the classroom came to an impasse. That much was to be expected. There was no way there would be anything that could be a weapon in the classroom. In case of emergency, there's probably nothing I could do but swing my own chair around. A gaze landed on the lockers that had come to be used for personal storage. The locker Mion used to store her pile of games was among them. Excuse me. There was one for each person in class, all lined up. Of course, there was one for me as well. Oh yeah, there was supposed to still be a tracksuit in my locker. Seeing me covered in mud would be strange. I should go change later. But first I needed a weapon. One of my classmates came, and it would be hard to rummage through all the lockers. I swiftly began opening the lockers one by one. They were mostly just filled with stuff like gym clothes, personal items, and umbrellas. An umbrella? If I couldn't find anything better, this would have to be my weapon. I was about to give one up on finding anything decent when I opened the locker that held exactly what I wanted. It was without a doubt a metal bat. It was well worn, pretty beaten up, but there was no doubt it was usable. I don't like the music. That music is not good. In that locker, it reeked of mold. There was also hung a baseball uniform. It was probably the locker of a student in a Pee Wee League or something like that. If that was the case, then he'd probably ask for it back. In that time, I could hear the voices of children scuffling their way noisily in from the hallway. Amongst them, I could make out Rika-chan and Satoko.
おはようございますです。あらあらあら、今朝はお早いですわね、ケイチさん。
I nonchalantly hid the bat I was holding behind my back.
なんなんですの、その身なりは。泥だらけでしたよ。
ああ、まあちょっとあってな。すぐ着替えるから勘弁しろ。
Well, with that said, I began taking off my clothes. Satoko began to blush as I expected her to.
レディーの前でお着替えなんてしつけがなってませんことよ。
着替えをじーっと見てるレディもしつけがなってないと思うぞ。男子は更衣室がないんだから諦めろ。
As Satoko feigned disgust, she went into the hall, still blushing. Conversely, Rika-chan continued to stare at me, preparing to change.
リカちゃんもレディなら着替えを見てるのは良くないと思うぞ。
僕はレディーじゃないですからいいのです。
She's like, that's fine. Okay. She deliberately pouted and looked at me with upturned eyes.
じゃあリカちゃんも今からレディだ。
レディーなら仕方ありませんです。
Rika-chan appeared to be satisfied with being considered a lady, made her way to join Satoko in the hallway. Just as I breathed a sigh of relief, Rika-chan stopped suddenly and turned back toward me. Uh-oh.
ケイチは野球を始めますですか？
It seemed like Rika-chan had noticed the bat.
ああ、ちょっとさ、体がなまってさ、ちょっと素振りでも始めようかなってな。
健康に気を使うのはとても良いことだと思いますです。
Okay, now you're gonna say something really creepy. She was talking like an old lady despite her appearance. After saying that, Rika-chan started to leave again, but stopped and looked back at me once more.
そのバットなくさないでくださいねです。
It seemed she already knew I took it out of someone's locker. There was no name on the locker door. I didn't know whose bat it was, but to be borrowing it until they complained. It wouldn't be for long, just until the gym storage shed was open. After quickly changing into a tracksuit, I checked the time. Still had plenty of time before class began because I came so early. I took the bat in one hand and went to the schoolyard. That was, of course, to practice my swing. I needed to make it known I would always be having a bat on me so I could practice my swing. At some point, the sunlight became even stronger. Disregarding my classmates as they made their way to school, I took my position in the shadows of the school building. Wasn't the academic type, so I wasn't much of an athlete either. I might get muscle pain if I just suddenly start swinging. I should at least start out with some warm-ups. I doubt anyone would think I was doing something out of the ordinary. Which was the exact opposite of my actual mental state. I gripped the bat and swung lightly. The bat was by no means light. The weight would make it a reliable weapon when I needed it to be. Of course, I could only pray that moment I needed to use this as a weapon would never come. It's interesting. It's like funny because like hearing the cicadas and kind of like hearing the descriptions is like so warm and summery, or like I think it's supposed to still be like early fall or maybe late spring. All I know is that right now it's freaking cold. We just got like 5 inches of snow, and then like now, like I looked at the temperature and it's like 2 degrees outside. That's Fahrenheit. So, what would that be in Celsius? Probably something around like -5 in Celsius, something like that. I'm not sure. Like I've never been good at like mentally doing the adjustment. It's well below freezing though. Just carrying it around could deter attacks against me. At least that's what I hoped. It didn't stop, remember,
あれ
what's his name? The guy who, Tomatake? Like, he had a weapon, and I didn't save him. Also, remember how, like, he was beaten up with something? What if it was this bat? Ooh. Hey, Mion, how's it going?
ケイちゃん、あんた何やってんの？
Being bombarded with such a hysterical voice, I jumped.
ああ、ケイチくん、野球部だよ。野球部だよ。
There's Ren and Mion.
先に行ったって言われて驚いたけど、ケイちゃん、あんた何やってるわけ？
見てわからないかよ。素振りだよ。甲子園だよ。
For the championship.
別にダイエットでもいいぞ。
ダイエットってケイちゃん、そんなに太ってたっけ？
ああ、知らなかったろ。実は三段腹なんだ。もちもちでタプタプなんだぞ。
もちもちでタプタプ。
Rena, please, no.
レナ、変な想像しなくていいぞ。
To distract Rena from imagining something that vulgar, I ruffled her hair messily.
じゃあまあ、頑張って県大会を目指してちょうだいよ。
おじさん応援してるわ。野球部の強い高校教えよっか。そこにいる左腕の亀田くんがすごいピッチャーなんだけどさ。
Kameda-kun?
頑張ってね。
Seems they already taken me for a baseball nut, but oh well. Well, if I really did make it to the championship, it would be a cinch. After all, I'd be the pitcher and the catcher. I'd pitch the ball and run past the ball, just through and change over to being the catcher and burst a super incredible explosive speed, Sonic style. I laughed dryly at the ludicrous image. Coming back to my senses, I smashed the bat against the ground.
さあ、何笑ってんだよ、俺。
I pounded the ground over and over. With each impact, the reverberation traveled through the bat, stung my hands. If they smiled at me like that, don't allow anyone close to me. Don't trust anyone. No matter how many times I tell myself that, they make me smile like that. I already knew quite well that they were demons dwelling within my smiling friends. But I just couldn't believe it. Did that kind of split personality really exist? Like how Rena confessed to the doctor, were they simply being possessed by Oyashiro-sama? In other words, did a supernatural being like Oyashiro-sama really exist, and was it possessing everyone to try and kill me? Yeah, that would be wonderful. If only everyone were actually my friends all along and everything was all just Oyashiro-sama's fault. Yeah, that's sad when demons possessing people and trying to kill you is the happy scenario.
前原圭一のバカ野郎！だから
I yelled out, drawing out all the power from the pit of my stomach. I raised the bat violently in the air.
甘えるんじゃね
As I screamed with all my might, I beat the metal bat into the ground over and over. With every impact, my weakness was being beaten down. Smash, forget. Smash, forget. Don't be soft. Know your enemy. Like hell, I'd let them kill me. My shoulders heaved up and down from my ragged breathing. I heard the first bell ring just as I calmed down. My poor boy, he's really losing it. Here we go. Gauntlet time. I gasped with a sudden realization. That was the final bell. As I felt all the tension drained from me, I let out a deep breath. My mind was in a muddled state for much of the entire day. I didn't feel like I was awake, but I didn't feel like I was asleep either. Couldn't say it felt especially comfortable, but it felt kind of like a relief the sanctity of the school part of my day life had been violated. How long would I have to keep on living like this? I could only grit my teeth and bear with it as the living hell slowly gnawed away at me.
ケイチくん、やろうやろう。部活の時間なんだよ。
Oh boy.
だよ。
Sound of Rena's voice brought me back to my senses.
ほらほら、ケイちゃん、ぼーっとしない。机を寄せて寄せて。
Everyone was moving their desks together as usual. That's right. It was a happy fun club time. Happy fun club time. I think he has to do it. Like, it sucks, but I think he has to play. But I know it's going to be terrifying. But I had no intention of taking part. I haphazardly stuffed the contents of my desk in my bag as I prepared to go home. That was a weak-handed gesture to avoid having to actually say, I'll be going home now.
なんだよ、ケイちゃん。今日も直帰なわけ？
Mion sounded quite disappointed.
気分が乗らないんだ。しばらくほっといてくんないかな。
The tone of my words that spilled out of my mouth matched Mion's disapproving glare. Felt like the air in the room had dried out. Satoko looked like she was about to say something, but perhaps dissuaded by the mood, she swallowed her words and stayed silent. Nobody said a thing. I took that to mean I could leave if I wanted. But the collective gaze of the four of them, like tiny pins used to mount an insect on display, held me in place. That's an image. Oh, that's a great descriptor. Ugh. Rena was the one who cut through the heavy mood.
ケイチくん、やっぱり女の子と一緒に遊ぶのなんか嫌だったかな？かな？
She said it in such a melancholy tone that it sent a wave of pain racing through my heart. If this pain was going to kill me, I wanted it to be the soft pain of me that could still feel pain. I tore my chest violently, tearing out the pins that held me in place.
そういうわけじゃねえよ。
I'd only been hurting myself by saying anything more, so I swallowed my words. Cutting things off there, I turned away and exited the classroom. They didn't speak a word to me as I left. I don't see this ending well either. Gosh darn it, I don't think he's got any good answers. Like, I think leaving's bad. I think staying's bad. I don't know what he would do. I don't know what I would do. I have no idea what I would do if I were him. Like, a lot of times I go into these games and I try and put myself in the character's shoes, right? And I often have my own feelings and ways I would try and deal with stuff, but this is absolutely not. I just don't even know. Like, I don't know what you would do, especially with the resources that he's got access to, which is practically none. I just don't know. I don't know if there's a good way out of this, or even a way to like try and mitigate it. I feel like there might have been a small window, but I think the window's closed now. And what's he supposed to do? Just forget how he feels? That's not very fair. Like, it sounds like you could just try and grin and bear it, but like, is that really a solution? No. I think it would just open him up. I just don't know what, running away might be the best thing he can do at this point. That sucks, because that's a crappy solution. It was a long, dull trip back home, but I didn't lose focus. I firmly squeezed the grip of the bat, which was already soggy from sweat. Realizing that, I wiped it down with my sleeve. If something were to happen, I wouldn't want it to be slippery. Since this morning, I'd become especially sensitive to the presence of cars. Even while walking, my ears picked up and sought out threatening sounds in the presence that could be closing in. That was why I could hear it. Without a doubt, there were footsteps. Those footsteps had matched up perfectly with mine for a while now. From what I could sense, it was just one person. But I had no intention of being careless. Did they intend to follow me like the car this morning until we were in a good location to assault me? Then it wasn't a good idea to keep walking like this. I stopped walking and looked back. The wooded path crowded with trees responded with silence as if there was nobody there to begin with. But I wouldn't be fooled. I was certain footsteps were following me. And just as I stopped, the footsteps stopped as well. Meaning the person following me wanted to keep their distance. That was, without a question, proof that I was their target. I held my breath, waiting for the presence to panic and start moving again. The trees rustled with the sound of the wind. The Higurashi also joined in a dissonant chorus, trying to throw my focus into disarray. Had 5 minutes passed? Or had this been like this the whole 30 minutes? It was so hard to breathe I might have suffocated. Seemed like I would be the first one to panic. Without a doubt, he was lurking in the shade of that tree with a bated breath. Then I'd make the first move. I fixed my grip on the bat. I raised it over my shoulder and began to swing at it, ready to swing it at any time.
Oi! いるんだろそこに!
With all my might, I screamed at whoever was hiding at the shade of the trees. But the presence in the shade didn't budge. Until the moment I found them, they had no intention of revealing themselves.
分かってんだよそこにいるのはよ
I screamed out angrily at them, but even still they didn't move at all. Then I'll go over there myself. With all due vigilance, I approached step by step. Stepping into the tree's shadow, I saw a human figure there. That figure was curled up like a small animal. Yep.
Lena!
When she realized I'd found her, her expression softened. She seemed apologetic, but wasn't going to speak a word.
なんか俺に用かよ
I wouldn't accept the silence and screamed the question at her.
別に、その、
Rena was in a panic with tears welling up in her eyes. But it was obvious that she had been following me.
部活はどうしたんだよ
ケイチ君がお休みしたから、レナもお休み。
関係ないだろ俺なんか気にしないで遊んでろよ
だって、ケイチ君のこと心配で。
You know what? This is the point where I would be so frustrated. I would be like BS calling right now. If you're like, I'm worried about you, if you're like, oh yeah, so you're so worried about me, you're sneaking like pins into my food. I would like just call her out on it. Be like, what? You're gonna pretend like you care about me when you do that? Really? Thinking about how I'd been acting up until now, it wasn't hard to imagine my behavior could have been perceived as strange. So Rena was concerned. At a quick glance, that's how it would seem. But I wasn't going to let my guard down that easily. Even if that were really the case, she still wouldn't have to do something like try to tail me. She should have called out to me when I was leaving and gone right out with me. And Rena didn't do that. She kept her distance from me, matched my walking speed. On top of that, she matched the sound of her footsteps and deviously tried to hide her presence from me. Then, after she realized I noticed she was there, she held her breath as she tried hiding from me. She wore a timid expression that would force one to take pity on her, but without a doubt, she was tailing me.
もうついてくんなよ
Still glaring at Rena, I continued walking onwards. After I walked on a bit, she ignored my command and began walking again, so I yelled at her once more.
ついてくるなって言ってるだろ
だってレナの家も同じ方向だし。
じゃあレナが先を歩けよレナが見えなくなったら俺も歩く
I moved out of the way and waved my bat violently to urge her forward.
レナはケイチ君と一緒に帰りたいな。
Making a pitiful expression, she meekly squeaked out the words in a voice that she knew would cut into my heart. That agitated me to no end. I knew it was a lie. If you wanted to go home together, then you should have called out to me. No, you're just blurting out random lies. Seemed the seething anger within me was written all over my face. Even without me saying anything, Rena understood what I was feeling inside.
わかったならほら、行けよ。
I swung the bat, urging her again to walk. Rena looked back and forth between me and the bat and started walking hesitantly, then stopped again.
早く行けよ、早く。
行くから、そのバットやめてよ。怖いの。
Rena guarded herself while pointing at me holding the bat. She may have realized I wasn't planning on using the bat for baseball. I lowered the bat, but still guardedly opening the way for her.
行けよ。これなら文句ないだろ。
There was nothing else she could protest. She passed by me timidly so as not to set me off. See, that's the thing though, is like now that he's done that, like it's kind of nice and refreshing, but now she's gonna be like blatantly like, alright, he's an enemy. As I watched her pass by, she stopped completely after having barely moved at all.
おい、立ち止まるなよ。
Then a powerful gust blew past us, barging my face with dust. As dust got in my eyes and clouded my vision. And the thing is, too, is like, what if it's not just Rena? I was just about to say that. It's like, maybe Rena's continuing on, but what if now she's a distraction for somebody else? Well, rubbing my eyes with my left hand, I swung blindly at the bat in my right, protecting the small opening I had presented. But Rena didn't even try to attack during that opening. Attack me? No, she hadn't even budged an inch. Could tell from the sound of her fluttering skirt in the wind. As her skirt settled, so did the silence. At that moment, the voice inside me immediately warned me of impending danger. I was caught by surprise. The smell of the air had changed? Without me realizing it, the air around me suddenly felt like the calamity was about to befall me. It was like the air had suddenly become invisible concrete, like Rena and I were locked in this space. Rena didn't move an inch. Also unable to move, I stared at her back. My heartbeat is pounding in my own ears. Rena was the first to break the silence. Instantly, she altered her stance. I felt like I had just witnessed her shift from Rena into the other person who looked like Rena. But the voice was the one I knew well, which filled me with a kind of bewildering pity. Carelessly, I felt relief upon hearing that pitiful voice.
ごめんね。聞いてもいい？
Too shy to even turn around, Rena squeezed her voice out desperately. As she trembled.
なんだよ。
あのね。
I really feel like something's coming up behind us.
どうしてバットなんか持ってるのかな？
The question Rena asked was by no means unexpected.
俺が何を持ってたっていいだろ。
でも、昨日まで持ってなかったし。どうして突然？
別に突然でもいいだろ。俺がバットを持ってるとおかしいかよ。
だって圭一くん、野球とかしない人だったでしょ？おかしいよ。
I couldn't tell what kind of answer she was looking for and was getting kind of tired of answering her.
突然、野球がしたくなったんだよ。それじゃおかしいか？
おかしいよ。
She answered instantly, and that annoyed me slightly.
突然野球がしたくなった。素振りがしたくなったから、バットを持ち歩いてる。それのどこが変なんだよ。
変。おかしい。絶対。なんで圭一くんまで。
ぶつくさとうるせえやつだな。俺がスポーツに目覚めるのが、そんなに変かよ。
I tried to sound a bit more threatening to end the conversation. Until my suspicions about Rena were cleared, I had no obligation to answer her questions.
ごめんね。そんなに怒らないで。
Rena still didn't turn around and spat out words of apology one after the next.
最後に一個だけ。
Oh boy.
一個だけ教えて。
これ以上話す気も教える気もねえよ。早く行けよ。
I yelled loudly at her, causing her to flinch like she'd been struck. Seeing her in such a pathetic state caused my heart to ache sorely. But even though she was afraid, she stubbornly kept herself from moving. Before I was able to threaten her again, Rena asked her final question.
なんでバットまで同じなの？
What did she mean by the bat was the same? I had no idea what she was talking about.
お前、何言ってんだ？
だから、なんでバットまで同じなのかなって。
何を言ってんだか全然わかんねえよ。もっとはっきり言え。
Even still, Rena didn't turn around. After inhaling deeply, she screamed.
だから、どうしてバットまでサトシ君と同じなの？
Right. It was his locker.
サトシって、 え
Upon hearing the name out of the blue, I became dumbfounded for a brief moment. By Satoshi, did she mean the student who transferred out last year? No, that couldn't be. Rena had tried to cover it up by saying he transferred, but Oishi-san told me quite clearly he went missing. He was the student who sat at my seat up until last year. He was believed to have been demoned away by Oishiro-sama's curse. I didn't know the details about his disappearance. The aunt he lived with was killed in the night of Onikakushi by a drug addict, and not long after that he suddenly vanished and was now missing. That Satoshi and I were... what? My gaze fell to the bat in my hands. Could it be? Satoshi Hojo. It was a bit difficult to see, but that was the name written on the white tape at the end of the bat. I see. So this was Satoshi's bat.
これサトシのバットだったんだな。誰も使ってなかったんでちょっと借りたんだよ。いいだろそれくらい。
そんなことじゃないの。
I'm guessing, like, is she gonna say, like, he started carrying the bat around everywhere he went too? The way Rena said that made it seem like the bat was something that should never be touched. Like it was some sort of offering at a shrine or a memento of the deceased. I could only stand there, perplexed and unable to respond. Rena continued speaking without waiting for a reply.
サトシ君の時とどうしてそんなにまで同じなの？
Rena was talking about more than just the bat belonging to Satoshi.
サトシ君もそうだった。野球チームには入ってたけど、本当は野球なんか好きじゃない人だったのに。
それが俺とどう関係が？
サトシ君もある日突然バットを持ち歩き始めたの。チームに入ってただけでスポーツなんかしない人だったのに。
What about it? I closed my mouth before I could say it out loud. Listen carefully, Keiichi. Rena's trying to tell us something important.
サトシ君もね、ある日突然一人で登校するようになったの。ケイチ君みたいに。そしてね、ある日突然素振りの練習を始めたの。
Okay, yeah, that's really concerning.
ケイチ君みたいに。そしてね、ある日突然バットを持ち歩くようになったの。ケイチ君みたいに。そしてね、ある日突然。
Then one day, suddenly, what? Rena had swallowed her words. Rena's sudden silence brought a hush back to the surrounding area. It was then that I could finally digest the contents of the entire conversation. She was saying my chain of action was exactly the same as Satoshi's. What was the meaning of this? Up until now, I'd forgotten all about Satoshi. I'd never paid much thought of him in the first place. Not only that, I didn't even know anything of what he'd done. My actions today should have been my own creation after all the planning I'd done. But they had been exactly the same as Satoshi's? Satoshi, no, more importantly, if both Satoshi and I acted the same, there was a really good possibility that what happened would be the same.
レナ、ある日突然サトシはどうしたんだよ。
Rena knew. She knew what became of Satoshi. Forget about what happened to the guy in the past. Rena knew what was going to happen to me.
答えろよレナ。サトシはどうしたんだよ。
With that, I grabbed Rena's shoulder, violently, forcibly turned her around to face me. Ah, bad idea. Bad idea. You shouldn't have got close. You shouldn't have got close. As I faced her, I felt a jolt travel through my entire body. I knew it! I knew it!
言ったよね、ケイチ君。
It was that person I didn't know. At least it definitely wasn't the Rena Ryugu I'd been talking to up until now. The voice just now didn't have a trace of trembling or emotion it had before. The amount of regret I felt for turning her around so carelessly was unsurpassed. The gaze that pierced like a cold needle. I'm guessing a real needle. The smile on her face that invoked an image of having been carved out by a knife. Chills went down my spine. My mind froze under the layer of rime. Both of Rena's eyes pierced through mine, leaving me unable to look away. As if reminding me of the fear of that time before, Rena brought her face close to mine, so close I could feel her hot breath. Her face had filled my entire field of vision. Then her sharply shaped lips grew into a sharper, like the curve of a crescent moon. She grinned.
言ったよね、ケイチ君。
After a short pause, Rena repeated the same words again.
サトシ君はね、転校しちゃったの。
Transferred, meaning what? What Rena meant must have been a new definition of transfer that I was previously not aware of. My throat and lip dried up, and I couldn't even acknowledge what I just heard. All I could do was swallow down my own saliva. It would seem Rena thought that as a nod. She pulled her gaze back and spryly stepped back 2 or 3 paces. As she did, my legs gave out and I fell to my knees pathetically. Rena and me on my knees underneath her emotionless smile. That had to be a very odd sight indeed. Seeing me in the pathetic state, she neither scoffed at me nor held out her hand. But I could neither stand nor escape her gaze shooting through my eyes. There was undoubtedly a metal bat in my hand, but right now it was useless to me, like a fly caught in her web. Sweat beaded all over my body. I could feel it dripping from my skin.
しないよねケイチ君は
Rihanna finally released me from the cage of time that felt like an eternity. But her question was missing something important. It was incredibly vague. Once again, I swallowed hard, urging her on.
何をだよ。
What she did not want me to do?
天候
So what do you mean transfer? What do you mean? Pitch hitter, take up another's bat. Satoshi and I had what? All my well-planned actions throughout the day had turned into nothing more than a reenactment of what Satoshi had done. Satoshi, had he really been in the same situation as I was now? The friends he'd gone along with had changed suddenly, and for no reason, at least none that I had noticed, planned to kill him? Then, fearing for his life as I am, he got a bat to protect himself and carried it around every day to practice his swing. And then one day, suddenly, he transferred. My blood went cold, causing a prickling sensation to course through my veins. Starting near my heart, it radiated outward from the top of my head to the soles of my feet, chilling every part of me without recourse. What did she mean by transfer? What did she mean by transfer? Was Satoshi still at wherever he transferred to? Was he the only one who would be able to understand me? Would he be able to tell me why it all ended up like this? More importantly, where did he transfer to? What did she mean by transfer? What did she mean by transfer? Before I knew it, I was at my front door. The frigid knob was hard to turn. Was nobody home? It wasn't that odd of an occurrence. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a single key attachment to my first steel keychain. I stepped into the entryway just as I was about to take off my shoes. A chill ran down my spine. Someone had entered right behind me. Oh no! Like a classmate messing around, sliding up right against my back. You're kidding, right? It had to be my imagination. Logically speaking, it was impossible for someone to be able to hide their presence within my personal space all the way through the door. But there was undoubtedly someone behind me. Hey now, Keiichi. How do you know they're there, even though they're behind you? Because I could hear the sound of flowing hair. There's no other reason I'd hear that sound. That's Mion. That was the presence. Because I could hear the sound of them blinking. Keiichi Maibara, there's no way you could hear that. My most base instincts were warning me of a presence. Common sense was telling me that it was just my imagination. It was just my imagination. There's no one behind me. I began to erase the mental image of an eerie figure standing behind me. But at the same time, I asked myself, if there was nobody, then what was I feeling? An uncomfortable sensation crawling up my spine. Actually, wouldn't it be better if there was somebody there? If there was nobody when you turned around, would you be able to accept that? I'd be able to answer all the questions by looking behind me. But I didn't have enough courage. I didn't have to do that simple task. Oh, right. I could try speaking to them. The person behind me might answer me. It was a random thought. I didn't care how I went about it so long as I didn't have to turn around. If I'd calmed down and thought about it, I would have known that it wouldn't have solved anything.
どなたですか?
I spoke in such a hoarse, broken voice I couldn't believe it was my own. I could almost feel them contemplating their response. Felt it. There's no way I could be able to do that. Calm down, Keiichi. It's all in your head. It's actually kind of funny. This sense, a sixth sense, is real. But feeling like you're being watched, eyes in the back of your head, those instincts are real. They're part of our survival kit. It's not literally like, oh, I'm sensing something I can't see. It's more of that there's really subtle things that we are subconsciously picking up on. Like, we know how it sounds when someone's breathing. Even if it's small and hard to hear, our brains do pick it up. Most of the time, we just dismiss it and ignore it because we usually tune out our own sounds, right? Of our own breathing, our own footsteps, our own everything. But if we're on alert, if we're worried, or if we're concerned, we can pick up on those things. But we don't, consciously do. It's subconscious. And so that's why we get that weird, creeping feeling like, oh, I feel like there's somebody watching me. I feel like there's somebody in the room. That's a real thing. At the time, I was certain I heard it. As if hesitantly trying to answer my inquiry, I was certain I could hear a sound of somebody inhaling. I heard it. I heard it. I heard it clearly. It was a girl. A young girl. I didn't know who, but A tiny speck of courage in me, however reckless it was, inspired a primal yet fitting solution with its current predicament, a scream. All the force of my body released from my lungs and through my throat, ceasing all my thought processes in my head. Suppressing all my thoughts and emotions, I began to collapse like a house of cards, someone managing to twist my body and look back as I did so. It was definitely there. Right there. Somebody was there. Until the moment I turned around, until I brought the area behind me into a field of vision, it was definitely there. Falling face up, my eyes traced the remnants of the presence suspended in empty space. It couldn't be. They were invisible. They looked just like they were there, but they weren't actually standing there? As I screamed, all the emotions I was holding back burst free in a violent wave. However, I was decidedly calm, and my emotional dam collapsed. The turbulent wave of pent-up emotions was skillfully diverted into a torrent of aggression. The emotion was just definitely required to extricate myself from this bizarre situation happening right in front of me. In my state of heightened lucidity, I entrusted my body to the fury. The metal bat held firmly in my right hand as I had drawn there by a magnet. A mid-level sweep would be the hardest to attack to dodge. I remember reading that like it from a book about swordmanship or something. I brandished my will to fight. After an image of that amalgamation of metal flashed as it swung from left to right, beating against the entryway. This is seeming like Tomotake-san. The bat slanted right wall, and the tip reverberated violently. Very calmly, I transferred the force to rebound into a sweep to the left. The door of the shoe cupboard was split into pieces. Those two swings whiffed through the empty space, but they seemed to have a great physiological impact on the enemy. I could feel the panic emanating from that space. The attack wasn't the only thing required. I extracted the bat from the cupboard it was embedded in and screamed as I spun my entire body around in a large arc. It's the same. My scream shook the air, imbuing my ferocious swing with every more destructive power. Crack. Without mercy or restraint, my violent strike, with certainly fatal force behind it, shattered the top of the cupboard. None of my attacks struck the enemy, but ferocity certainly seemed to impact them. Breathing heavily, my entire body soaked in sweat, the invisible enemy there, but not there, dispersed. When I was certain the enemy had retreated, I locked the front door and latched the chain. No way. Had I only feigned retreat, it was now inside my house. Once again, I channeled my aggression and searched the house for the presence. But it was gone. I had succeeded in fending it off. At that moment, the tension drained from my body and let out a deep sigh of relief. All that emotion I'd been holding back chaotically merged together and began to flood out. A hodgepodge of fear, accomplishment, and disbelief mixed together and began to flow through my body. Unable to deal with each individual feeling, I beat them all back with the strongest exhaustion. Even in this moment, I remained composed. If you don't lock the door, you are an idiot. After checking that the doors throughout my house were locked, okay, good. I went up to my room on the second floor and closed the curtains. I straightened my back and tilted my head back a little. After clearing my mind of all idle thoughts, I managed to calm down even more. What was that at the front door? There was definitely something there. Thinking about it, maybe it was just an apparition I dreamt up in my confused state, but I really didn't think that was the case. Calm down, Keiichi Maibara. Compose yourself. But no matter how calmly I thought about it, what just happened wasn't a figment of my imagination. That was obviously a supernatural phenomenon. Without a doubt, something was behind me. It wasn't something sort of illusion I saw amidst my confusion and disorientation. Proof? I had just one piece. When I asked who is it, they inhaled as if they were about to answer. That sound had clearly reached my ears. The situation I was in right now was still unclear. Either I'd been possessed by a supernatural phenomenon known as Oishiro-sama's curse, or this was a ruse by the villagers who believed in it and were imitating it. Either way, their motives were unclear. The roundabout way it had been done was also still a mystery. If it was perpetuated by humans, that would mean admitting that Rena and the rest of them were doing it, but it would be solvable. Oishi-san and the rest of the police would surely arrest my enemy. But if it were a manifestation of Oishiro-sama's curse, I wondered what that would happen. Oishiro-sama was clearly declared the curse didn't exist. Oishi-san, sorry. Someone caught in a former video that I had mixed up Oishi and Oishiro-sama's names, so I was making it sound like Oishi was the demon, and now I just said that Oishiro-sama is the investigator, so I don't know what's happening there. Oishi-san very clearly declared the curse didn't exist. At that time, those words were pretty dependable, but as things were now, with the rising possibility the perpetrator were not human, he suddenly seemed quite unreliable. If I told Oishi-san this was the work of Oishiro-sama's curse, what would happen? I couldn't imagine his reaction, but it would go to question that void would expand rapidly between myself and Oishi-san. With me having so few allies to begin with and not being able to confidently declare whether or not this was a curse, there was no merit in doing that. I'd better keep the facts of what just happened in the doorway to myself. It would be better if I didn't add to what happened here to the memo behind the clock. There was still ever a slight possibility that I was actually confused when I thought I was composed, that I was going berserk at the entryway. How wonderful would that be if that were really what happened? I would be able to refute Orishio-sama's curse. But if I denied Orishio-sama's curse, that would mean admitting that Rena and the rest were perpetrators. If I said that Rena and the rest weren't the perpetrators, that would mean that believing Orishio-sama's curse. By denying both those, I'd be admitting to that I myself was losing it. The three options from which I couldn't choose became a trilemma of sorts. They mixed together and formed a whirlpool in my mind, making my head spin. Alright, I'm really feeling like I'm starting to lose it. I cut it out, but I could have sworn I was smelling something burning, and I went to go double check, and it's fine. I'm losing my mind. Oh my gosh. I don't know. I think I'm just like getting caught up in the emotions of everything, and like I don't know, I just had like a weird thought. Like, I was just like, is the oven like on or something? It was just weird. Okay, moving on. So, three options, trilemma. Mixed together, making your head spin. Once again, I straightened myself and leaned my head back slightly to cool myself down. Calm down, Keiichi. Accept what's actually happened as reality. Stop thinking of anything more than that. But I couldn't help but think of it. How wonderful it would be if it turned out that I was delirious and everything up till now was just a figment of my imagination. Orishio-sama's curse wouldn't exist, and I would still be the best buddies with the Rena and the rest. I wouldn't have to be crazy. That would be the first time in my life I ever wished for such a thing. When the nice thought is you are absolutely mad. Oh no. The phone rang noisily downstairs. Let's go a little longer at least. Generally there were no calls from me, so I never really answered the phone much. But since my parents weren't here, I had no choice. I squirmed off the bed and went downstairs.
もしもし、前原です。
ケイチ、お母さんだけど。
Okay. I intuitively had a bad feeling about this. It was because I thought she was going to ask me to go out and buy some things. So I took the initiative.
何？別に俺、夕食はインスタントでもいいよ。まだいっぱいあったでしょ。
The other day when we went out as a family, I bought a whole case of cup noodles. I wanted to get a bunch of different kinds actually, but they refused since the individual packs were expensive, so instead I got a whole case of the mega-sized pork bone and ginger flavored ones I liked. But my parents don't like strong flavors and didn't touch any of them, so the cupboards are still full of them.
だからさ、買い物に行く必要はないんじゃないの？
ケイチ、買い物のお願いじゃないの。お父さんとお母さんね。お仕事の関係で急遽東京に行かなくちゃならなくなったの。
Oh, I don't want to be alone.
今から？
That was really abrupt.
もう着いちゃってるの。
Oh my gosh!
お昼には出発してたからね。
It was quite a distance from Tokyo to Hinamizawa. Going at full speed down the highway would take like 6 hours. Dad had a license, but since he doesn't like the highway, they likely took the train. It would have taken longer.
ケイチもお父さんとお母さんの話を聞いてたからわかるかもしれないけど、お父さんのお仕事の契約がね、
Right.
今ちょっとうまくいってないの。
Now that she mentioned it, I did remember they talked about all that time about how his job prospects weren't looking so good.
お父さんはそういうのに繊細な人だから、このままだとお仕事にも影響が出ちゃうの。
That makes sense. Part of my father's particularly fragile artistic personality, his emotions changed as easily as the fall sky. You could also just say he didn't take criticism.
でも、そんなの電話でやり取りすればいいじゃないか。
ケイチ、お父さんのお仕事なんだから、もうちょっと応援してあげて。とにかく電話よりも直接会って話した方が早いの。誤解もないし。
Alright. As their son, there's nothing more I could say once they started talking about work.
だから帰るのは明日の晩になっちゃうの。ケイチ、一人で大丈夫よね。
Man, if it were any other time, yes, it'd be perfectly fine. Right now, I don't know.
別に死にゃしないよ。
ケイチ、死んじゃうなんて軽々しく言っちゃダメよ。心配事があったら相談してね。母さん、きっと相談に乗れると思うから。
Yesterday, I did bring up if I died rather abruptly, so I suppose they were a little worried. But really, I was more depressed by the fact that nothing would be solved by telling them. But I didn't plan on dying. At least not while I still knew nothing. I would never allow it.
死なないよ。俺は、あがいてでも生き延びる。
That's an odd way to phrase that, buddy.
そうじゃあね、明日の朝ちゃんと起きるのよ。朝ごはんは食べてね。お風呂と歯磨きも忘れないのよ。
へいへい。そんじゃ。
The call ended like that. Sometimes my parents went off to Tokyo for business meetings. But Tokyo was far away. They normally did things by the phone. The times they did go were normally planned out in advance and never happened this suddenly. I couldn't say that those circumstances didn't feel strange, or rather, unnatural. Anyway, I only need to recognize the reality of the situation. That tonight, I was the only one in the house. That's when my parents came back from work, I'd be gone. Missing. Vanished. Looking back on the series of events of the previous 5 years involving Orishiro-sama's curse, it wouldn't seem that strange at all. Come to think of it, it was getting pretty late. I didn't think it was good that the only light on with the whole house would be my front room on the second floor. It was the same as broadcasting to an enemy that my parents were gone, that this is their chance. First, I ran to the living room, flicked on the lights, and turned the TV on to a reassuring volume. Next was the study. I similarly turned on the lights and some soft music. With this, from the outside, it would look like my parents were here. Once again, I went through the house, checking to see if there were anything left unlocked. When I saw the veranda and the laundry still hanging out there, I went pale. They would have made it too obvious. I needed to take it down. I snatched down the laundry haphazardly and erased all traces that my mother wasn't there. I should be fine now. Ah, the garage! They hadn't gone all the way to Tokyo by car, but they'd gone up to Okinomiya Station. The garage was empty, wide open and in plain sight. That was no good. I panicked and rushed out the back to close the normally open garage door. It should be fine now. I need to get the paper. Mom always got the paper. Since they left the afternoon, the evening paper was still out there. Oh, my premonition was correct. I pulled everything from the mailbox and dropped it in the entryway. With this, for sure, this time, it should be fine. Did you leave the door open when you left, though? Come to think of it, leaving the cupboard busted like this for my little freak-out was kind of bad. I just say I tripped and fell and the bat was holding smashed into it. Even so, just leaving it in its current state wasn't good. I should clean it up a little before Mom gets back to scolds me. I remembered that there was a broom and dustpan in the closet. As I was going to get them, the phone rang once again. Oh no.
もしもし、前原です。
あら、圭一くん。
Oh no.
お母様はいらっしゃいますか
Oh
しら。
no.
今ちょっといないんですけど。
You idiot, Keiichi Maribara. Don't reveal your parents are gone. You can follow up still, calm down, take care of it.
すぐに戻ると思います。
That wasn't a good response either. Now they might say they'll call again or tell her to call when she comes back.
なら結構です。大した話でもありませんから。では失礼しますわね。
Oh my gosh, that's terrifying. It seems like they're actually feeling out for this. The scenario I feared didn't play out, eliciting a sigh of relief. That call was fortunate in more ways than one. I did have to deal with the telephone calls coming from my parents tonight. I was somehow able to deal with the phone call just now, but I couldn't continue to rely on such poor improvisation. I needed to make up a good story to explain my parents were home, but couldn't answer the phone at the moment. They were making tempura. I couldn't step away right now. That wasn't good enough. They were sick and went to bed because they weren't feeling well. Was that going to be safe enough? I was thinking about it on my way back to my room when the phone rang once again. It was like they were calling because they knew I was going to lie. I didn't want to pick up, but I knew I had to. I'd suspect my parents weren't here. I should have just taken the phone off the hook until under the pretext I didn't realize that it was. But since the phone rang, I had to pick it up. I prepared myself and lifted up the receiver.
もしもし。
I stopped announcing that this is the Maribara residence. I had no reason to be kind to someone who didn't know the identity of. But unlike my uncouth tone, the person on the other side sounded goofy and lighthearted.
どうも、夜分遅くに申し訳ありません。私、沖宮書房の大石と申しますが。
大石さんですか。
前原さんですか。こんばんは。お元気そうで何よりです。
ちょっと待ってくださいね。
I grabbed the portable handset and rushed to my room with it. It was the same no matter where I was since there was no one else home, but I wanted to be in a spot that felt just a bit safer when speaking on the phone with Oishi-san. I wouldn't trust that. I wouldn't trust that. I remember how those things worked. It was when I was younger, but someone else can just pick up the line, cover the mouthpiece, and listen. If there is someone in the house. Oh, I hate that this game's making me paranoid.
お待たせしました。
いかがですか、その後お変わりは。
Since then, When was that exactly? There was something about the brazen way he talked that rubbed me the wrong way. The last time I spoke with Oishi-san was 2 days ago. The day I stayed home from school, I met Oishi-san on the way back from the hospital, and we headed into town for lunch and had a talk. Then after that, Ren and Mion came to check up on me. Whenever I spoke with Oishi-san, they always knew about it. It was like this since the first time I met him. Today's phone call might well be found out by them as well.
もしもし、聞こえてますか、前原さん。
すみません。なんて言いました？
その後、何か変わったことはありませんかとお尋ねしたんです。
I think he should say something, but I know he's
返
scared.
事がないんで焦りましたよ。
特には。
The words stopped in my throat. There was a ton of stuff that had happened. All of it baffling. What should I talk about? I didn't understand any of it, but I should try asking. If I didn't ask now, maybe never have another chance. This night, when my parents went home, I had no guarantee I would make it through the night safely after all.
大石さん、やっぱり俺、命を狙われているみたいです。
本当ですか？
偶然の可能性もあるんですが、先日俺が病気で休んだ日、
あの二人？
レナとミオンです。そしてそこで、大石さんと一緒に昼飯を食ったことを正されました。
それで？
お見舞いってことでおはぎを置いていったんですが、その中に針が入ってたんです。偶然飲み込まずに済みましたが、これってやっぱり脅迫でしょうか？
その針は？
よく見かけるような普通の裁縫針のようでした。糸を通す穴が開いていて。
違いますよ、前原さん。証拠になります。脅迫だと立証できるかもしれません。その針はありますか
？That's right, that's it! I dropped the receiver and rushed downstairs. When I tossed the mochi, I'd overlooked out of terror, but the needle was a valuable piece of evidence. Let's see, I threw the mochi and the needle to the wall together. If it was there, then it would be on the living room wall. Your mom cleaned it up, you idiot. My prudent mother had cleaned the living room wall, and there was not a trace of mochi left on it. Could it be that I dropped the gap between the wall and the carpet? I frantically searched by running my palm along the carpet, but nothing turned up. I tried moving around the sofa and desk and pulling up the carpet and flapping around it, but I couldn't find the needle. Did my mom clean up everything without noticing it? It was just 2 days ago. I didn't know what day they collected the burnable trash, but still in the trash bin by the kitchen. I rushed to the kitchen, opened up the lid of the pail, and poured out the contents. But even at a glance, I could tell it would be incredibly difficult to find a needle in this pile of trash. I was looking for a needle in a trash sack. I know. I'll try running my hand through it. That was a bit gross, but I was looking for a needle. If I felt a prick, I'd be able to find it. Don't do that! It was a pretty tactless method, but it was the quickest. I held my breath and started searching the pile of trash with my hand. Filth flew around. There's nothing more disgusting than this, but it was not the time to be concerned about such details. I continued for a while, but nothing turned up. I wanted to search more thoroughly, but it was still on the phone. I shouldn't keep Oishi-san waiting too long. Later, when Mom got back, I'd have to ask her if there was a needle. I hastily began scribbling a note on the pad affixed to the refrigerator with a magnet. Was there a needle? I scrawled the words with a red pen. I dashed up to the stairs where I had been keeping Oishi-san waiting for far too long.
もしもし、どうでしたか？
見つかりません。あの時はつい気が動転していて。
そうですか。見つかればでいいんです。保管しておいてくださいね。
That's right. The needle wasn't the only incident. I had to tell him about this morning, a hit and run.
あと大石さん。実は今朝。
The van was definitely aiming at me. I could say that without question due to the circumstances at the time.
その車のナンバープレートは見ましたか？こちらでも探してみます。
Dang! All the time I just flipped out yelling at him. I didn't even look at the plate. What failure on my part with the needle and the plate number. I was so focused on protecting myself, I let some of the most important details slip out of my grasp. I punched my pillow, annoyed at how worthless I was.
すみません。白いワゴン車ってこと以外はわかりません。
仕方ないことですよ、前原さん。
He's like, gosh darn it!
惹かれかければ気も動転します。
やっぱりこれだって偶然じゃないですよね。
Oishi-san started to hem and haw over the other end. I could imagine him folding his arms.
あと、レナの様子もやっぱり怪しいです。
それはどんな感じですか？
When Rena said on the way home today, asking why I was so much like Satoshi-kun. Now I could say it with confidence. That Rena knew what happened to Satoshi. She knew there was more to it than him simply disappearing.
レナは知っています。去年の鬼隠しにあったサトシのことを何か知っています。
それは具体的にどういうことですか？
レナが言うには、俺はサトシと そっくりらしいんです。このまま行くと俺もサトシと同じ運命をたどると、そんな感じのことを言うんです。
運命ですか。具体的にどんな運命をたどるか言及しましたか？
She was too vague.
転校と。
転校？
レナはサトシは転校したって言ってるんです。で、俺もこのままだと転校しちゃうぞって。
Oishi-san let out a stern sigh and then grumbled loudly.
前原さん、それはおそらく何かの脅迫、もしくは
I mean,
警告ですね。
yeah!
俺もそう思ってます。
At that point, I started to think, would it be prudent to sum up everything that happened until now as the machinations of some human perpetrator? Or other than the theory of Rena and the others, I was left with Oishi-sama's curse actually existing in the only explanation. Of course, I couldn't tell that to Oishi-san. Except, Rena's strange behavior could be proof of either scenarios. Whether it was Oishi-sama's curse or being real or everything being part of a conspiracy committed by all the villagers. Rena was involved. Rena had to know something. Rena was suspicious. What exactly was Rena? I couldn't help but think that she was somehow involved with the prior string of mysterious deaths. I seemed to recall that Oishi-san had admitted that he had dug into Rena's past a little. He was probably just downplaying it when he said a little, meaning he had actually dug pretty deep most likely. I wanted to hear about Rena. I wanted to know what happened at her previous school, among other things that they were still unknown to me. If Rena was somebody I should suspect, no, not that. I wanted to know the truth. Tonight, I was alone in this huge house. Even though I said I couldn't count on them, I had lost security I felt in my parents being around. It wasn't like this house was some sort of fortress or castle. If a malicious person decided to use brute force, they'd easily gain entry. There were no other residents close to the Maribara residence. No one would be able to hear anything, no matter how loud it was. I had never felt as much resentment toward my father's artistic temperament and at the fact that he'd had this house built in such a remote location as I did right now. I wondered if I'd still be here by tomorrow morning. So I had to ask, right now, because I had no idea when the next chance would come, especially because there's someone at the door!
大石さん、聞きたいことがあるんです。隠さないでくださいね。
ええ、何でも聞いてください。
Even though I was far away from the other end of the line, it was the most reliable he had ever felt. I wanted to ask about Rena, about what happened at her previous school.
実は、レナの。
I noticed the sound had been going on for a while now. Since I was so focused on the call, I hadn't paid attention to it at first, but I finally realized it was the doorbell. The time was 7 o'clock. It was past the time the postman would be making a delivery and past any sensible time for a neighbor to be visiting. I considered just acting like nobody was home, but that wouldn't be good. That would ruin all the work I'd put into making it look like my parents were home. I needed to answer the door.
もしもし、前原さん？
すみません。誰か来たみたいですので、ちょっと玄関に行ってきます。
お客さんですか？
No,
すみま
no,
せん、すみません。
stay on the line. Keep him on the line.
今夜のお電話はこれくらいにしましょうか。
That would be a problem.
いえ、すぐ戻りますから。電話はこのままでいいですか？
はいはい、構いませんよ。
I dropped the headset on my bed and dashed down to the door. The only other thing, though, it's like, we keep him on the line, that's good, but what if it's like Mion or somebody, they pick up the phone and they ask who it is, and it's like, oh, it's Oishi, and they're like, oh, is it? I nodded to make up a good excuse to get them to leave. I had a hunch it was a lady who called right before Oishi-san did, in which case it would be one of the neighbors who's friends with my mom. I'd just say my mom isn't feeling well and went to bed early. That would be the easiest option. Oh, no! It'd be hard to ask her to wake up my mom if she's not feeling well. The bell continued to ring at regular intervals. If someone didn't answer after you rang the bell so much, you'd normally give up and go home, wouldn't you? Peek out! Without removing the chain, I opened the door slightly and peered out at the visitor. A chill ran down my spine. I knew it. Somewhere deep inside, I had prepared for this moment. I had tried to escape it by imagining the easiest person to deal with, one of my mom's friends.
こんばんは。
Rena.
That shouldn't be any reason for Rena to come over at this hour. The timing also made me feel uneasy, because it was just as I was about to ask Oishi-san about Rena, which I could have chalked up to this being mere coincidence, but those unsettling words from Mion several days ago echoed in the back to me.
さーてね、おじさんにわからないことはないからね。
レナ一人。
うん。
seeing that Mion wasn't with her. But that didn't change the situation at all.
何しに来たんだよ。
ねえ、ケイチ君。ちゃんとドアを開けてお話ししたいな。
Rena, we could talk just fine the way things are.
レナは玄関に入っちゃダメなのかな
I'm so terrified of this little girl. It was true that speaking through the same door was the right way to talk to a classmate. But
うち、夜は必ずチェーンかけてるんだよ。気にすんなよ。
なら、仕方ないかな。
Rena looked at the ground sadly. But she kept smiling at least, and her effort to keep a smile up was quite pitiful. Even though she was tugging at my heartstrings, I didn't lower my guard. As long as I stayed like this, even if it made my heart ache, my life wasn't in danger. What I really feared more than the possibility of hoodlums would assault me if I removed the chain, was trusting Rena enough to remove the chain and having my friendship betrayed. As long as the chain wasn't unlatched, even if it made my heart ache, I wouldn't have to deal with being betrayed by Rena. Since it didn't seem like I'd removed the chain from her slight urging, she appeared to give up on trying to get into the entryway.
さ、ケイチ君。ご飯食べた？
No, I hadn't eaten. Since my mom wasn't there, dinner wouldn't be ready no matter how long I waited. I lay down when I got home, woke up on my phone, didn't have a chance to eat since I used up all that time talking. I was going to have a couple noodles in case, I could just eat one whenever I wanted to.
いや、まだだよ。それがどうしたよ。
じゃあよかった。これ見て。お惣菜とか持ってきてあげたの。
Rena held out a stack of boxes wrapped in cloth.
お台所とか貸してくれれば、お味噌汁も温めてあげられるよ。
いいよ、そこまでしてくれなくても。
でも、お豆腐もお野菜もたっぷりなの。
What do you do?
ケイチ君、そういうの嫌いかな
There's no way I wouldn't like that. I love miso soup with lots of ingredients. White radish, carrots, burdock roots, and potatoes, dense and fibrous root vegetables. Yeah, that miso soup looked incredible.
ご飯も持ってきてあげたから、レンジで温めればすぐ食べられるし。
Without a doubt, rice needs miso soup. Stuffing rice down your gullet, sipping miso soup between ravenous bites. Oh yes, how wonderful it is to be born Japanese.
それからね、またお漬物を作ってきたんだよ。今度は山菜のお漬物なの。
Before I had moved here to Hinamizawa, I scoffed at the mountain vegetables called sansai. But I was captivated by their charm the first time I tried them. Such a deep yet light flavor. So the so-called supermarket vegetables taste rough and overpowering in comparison. If you had to describe them, they would be vegetables for the uninitiated. To become an expert such as myself, you first had to partake of sansai. That was common knowledge around here that the Ryugu family's traditional pickles were wonderfully delicious. No matter what kind of pickles they were. They'd go well with the fluffy white rice.
それからね。
Oh wait, there's more. So delicious. It just seems so delicious. Farewell to my unhealthy self, who said he'd make do with a couple noodles. Rena appeared to be in good spirits, and she was offering such delicious-sounding dinner. The stress evaporated from my gut, and hunger reared its vicious head. At the same time, my wariness of Rena suddenly dwindled. Rena did say she was alone. It shouldn't be a problem letting her inside. Though the possibility that I was laced with poison still hadn't been ruled out. At that moment, a cold chill ran down my spine once again. Couldn't understand why such a sensation had occurred just then. But the voice inside me was sounding the alarm. She's trying too hard. This happy Rena speaking this charming dinner was dependent on one premise. And that premise was that tonight dinner hadn't been made at my house, meaning it was under the assumption my mom, who should be making it, wasn't here. At any normal household, 7 o'clock would be around the middle of dinner time. If my mom were here, we'd be eating dinner around this time as well. The fact that she brought over all the makings of a meal at this time was inherently strange. Ah! Unless she knew. Rena. Did she know my parents weren't home? But there was also the chance this was a bluff. I had turned out the lights, a bunch of other stuff to make it seem like my parents were here. There was a chance that Rena was unsure if my parents were home. But I had to wonder. The laundry, the garage, the evening paper. There were plenty of signs of them being hastily tidied up. It was hard to say that Rena didn't have a chance to determine if my parents were here or not. But there was no reason for me to confess that right now. Should I try holding on to the fact as long as I could? First of all, the chain was still latched. As long as I didn't take it off, Rena wouldn't be able to do anything to me. That's a lie!
ありがたいんだけどさ、もう少しで夕飯ができるみたいなんだよ。
え、そうなの？そうなの？
せっかくで申し訳ないんだけどさ、その
Unable to think of a good way to refuse, my words trailed off weakly.
でもちょっとはおかずになると思うな。
悪いけど間に合ってるよ。うちのお袋ってさ、結構おかずをいっぱい作るんだよ。だから。
え、おかずあるの？
With a smile that bordered on a cringe, I dodged her questions apologetically. But the feeling I tried to ignore began creeping up my back again. I spoke as if my mom was settled down for dinner right now, but it didn't mesh well with what Rena was saying. Rena was talking as if she was aware of some obvious fact, and that I was aware of it as well.
ケイチ君もおかずとか作れるんだね。何を作ったのかな？
There's no answers!
いや、その、別に俺が。
Rena had assumed out of nowhere I'd made the dishes. No, not so much I'd made them, but rather that my mom hadn't.
本当に作ったの？
I think Keiichi's forgot something here, remember? It's a simple answer. Rena stopped by to pick him up. She came to the door, and her mom said that he's already gone to school. And she probably mentioned that, oh, we're about to head off to Tokyo right now. So, she knows. I think your mom told her.
おかず。ケイチ君が？
だから、俺が作ったんじゃないよ。お袋が作った。あ、いや、作ってるんだよ。
There's the lie.
今。だからさ、悪いけど、レナの持ってきてくれたのは食べられないんだよ。
Rena felt silent at that moment. At that moment, I felt the light had suddenly disappeared from her eyes. Yeah.
ケイチ君のお夕飯、当ててみようか？
なんだっていいじゃないか。
ね。
The conversation might appear natural at first glance, but Rena was firmly in control. It felt like I was being interrogated.
そのお夕飯、お湯だけで作れるんじゃないかな。
おいおい、侮るなよ。うちのお袋のスペシャルなディナーを見くびるなってんだ。そりゃもう満館全席状態ですごいのなんの。
I tried my best to put on a strong front, but I couldn't grip my teeth quite right. So instead, I looked like someone who's borderline hysterical. But Rena showed no reaction whatsoever, even to that silliness.
ケイチ君、本当にお母さん、ご飯作ってってくれたの？
いや、だから、くれたんじゃなくて、今作ってるんだよ。もうすぐ晩飯に。
Uh-huh. Rena had taken the assertion of mine that my mother was home making dinner right now and was completely ignoring it. I could tell that more panicked the colder Rena became.
ねえ、ケイチ君。
At that moment, an uncomfortable chill crept in from the gap in the doorway.
お母さん、お家にいるのかな？
I couldn't keep up the charade anymore. Rena, she knew full well my parents weren't home. But I'd come too far to admit that now. Anyway, my parents were here, we'd be having dinner soon, that was the situation I concocted. So I answered. I told her she was here.
いるよ。もちろん。
I could feel the humidity drying out from the surrounding air. Rena's eyes were becoming even more frigid, piercing me with a galid glare. I don't know if I've seen that word before. A galid?
どうして？
何のことかな？
I tried acting casual, but that facade was torn off me the instant I looked into Rena's eyes. That look, it informed me Rena's responding faster than she could open her mouth.
どうしてさっきから嘘をつくのかな？
Oh no!
嘘なんか？
嘘だよね。
嘘なんかじゃ。
嘘だよ
Rena's outburst sent a jolt shooting through my body. Rena and I were still separated by a few inches of slightly ajar, but still chained door could afford. But despite that, I was still being cornered. My house, which had been considerably safe haven until now, had become more like a dark alleyway where no one could save me.
ケイチ君のお夕飯、当てるよ。
I knew now that Rena had already known my parents would not be here tonight. But it was still so strange it had come to this. Even if she somehow knew my parents weren't home, there's no way she'd be able to guess what I'd be eating tonight. But Rena said she'd guess. How could she guess it? How could she know it was instant?
カップラーメン。
I mean,
当たりでしょ？
it's not a stretch, but it's also possible she's looked around your house, bro. Just saying. That was going to eat. Wait, the cooking repertoire of a man who can't do housework properly is probably nothing but cup noodles after all. Looking at the statistically, it was the most probable answer. That didn't mean she was guessing.
ラーメンだけじゃきっとお腹すくと思うな。ご飯とかも一緒の方がきっと腹持ちいいと思うよ。
Calm down, Keiichi Marbar. That was just coincidence. I was just reading certain tales of mine. So the fact that she was inferring what I was thinking alarmed me. But it wasn't as if she was actually reading my mind. If it was being read, then she was a demon. No, not a demon. Things like that, they couldn't possibly exist.
好きなの？
ラーメンがかよ。
豚骨生姜味。
What? What? It's just blanked it out? What was that? Rena indicated that the point my answer was addressing was wrong. Her rebuttal was so short I momentarily didn't understand the words Rena had spoken.
ごめん、レナ。今、なんて。
え？何が？
今さ、何が好きって聞いたんだよ。
It wasn't long before I regretted how carelessly I'd pushed forward with that question. It was such a simple answer. That was why I wasn't able to comprehend it.
豚骨生姜味。
Yep. Oh, baby. I wonder how I appeared at that moment, and my mind went completely blank until the moment I was able to recover. As my field of view began to distort, slowly swirling in a counterclockwise direction, I lost all sense of balance.
なんでそこまでわかるんだよ
I didn't even deny it. That was the type of frenzied state I was in. How could Rena know even this? Not even caring as I mashed my head against the door and fixated my gaze on Rena. But she didn't even flinch when she saw me do that.
確かに勝った。まとめて勝った。俺が箱買いした。それがどうしてわかるんだ。
なんでかな。不思議だね。だね。
How could I dodge a question at a time like this? The chain and the door suddenly were no longer protecting me.
どうしてわかる？なぜ知ってる？答えろ！
買ったのはセブンスマートだよね。
Oh, that's creepy. Oh, that's creepy. A shiver ran up my spine. I tried covering it up with an angry facade.
だから、なんでわかるんだよ！
ケイイチ君の後ろ、ずっとくっついてたから。
Oh, so she's like a stalker. Oh dear.
何を言ってんだよ。
Yeah, you see, people always were going crazy about the yandere girlfriends. This is what yandere girlfriends look like, buddy. Oh boy. I couldn't understand why she was saying she'd been following me all this time.
だから、レナがケイイチ君の後ろにずっとくっついてたの。
Like that night? The night I was absorbed in my phone conversation with Oishi-san, I didn't even sense her being there, standing by the door, behind me, standing there just like that?
ケイイチ君がいろんなラーメン選んでるとこ、後ろからずっと見てたの。いろんな種類を選んでたんだよね。それでお母さんに怒られたの。高いラーメンばっかり選ぶから、一種類にしなさい。
Oh.
それでケイイチ君、大好きな大きいカップの豚骨生姜味を選んだんだよね。レナも好きだよ、豚骨ラーメン。でも、大きいカップは全部食べきれないけどね。
My brain was paralyzed, dulling my senses. It might have been a defense mechanism to diminish the fear I was feeling to traumatizing levels. With the fear being dismissed, the fog enveloping my mind was cleared away. Then I could understand what Rena was saying and started to put meaning behind her words. Even so, my fear hadn't subsided completely. It was like I was standing on the edge of a cliff, so eyes closed so I didn't have to look down. I didn't actually solve any of the basic problems. I slowly took a step backward, and as I withdrew, Rena advanced.
だからケイイチ君、ここを開けて。レナと一緒にご飯食べよう。
Yeah, no. You'd have to be a mad person to actually open the door.
きっと美味しいから。ね。
No. Please. Oh, yeah. I don't know what. I clicked something. Rena's pale, slender fingers squirmed through the cracks in the door one at a time as she had a mind of her own, rattling the chain. As she had unlatched the chain from the door, a feeling of terror would have just exploded within me. But Rena didn't do that. She was simply imploring me to remove the chain. I tried my hardest to light the fuse of the powder keg at my heart, trying again and again. Clatter, clatter. But it doesn't light. It doesn't light!
開けて、ケイチくん。
帰ってくれ。頼むから。帰ってくれ。
どうしてそんな意地悪を言うのかな。
That's so terrifying.
帰ってくれ。帰れよ。帰れ。
The powder keg inside me finally went off. No smoldering, it just exploded. I tackled the door. Don't do that! The force through the door had knocked Rena momentarily off balance. I couldn't hesitate here. I grabbed onto the doorknob with both hands, planted my feet firmly, and pulled with all my might. But that slamming sound I so desired didn't happen. I could feel a tiny, disturbing piece of resistance keeping the door from closing. At the source of that was Rena's fingers. Each of those fingers wiggling, squirming around like the tendrils of a carnivorous plant through the cracks in the doorway.
痛いよ、ケイチくん。
Oh, I don't like this. It wasn't a harsh shriek, more of a yell, but she was trying to keep back. I kept on pulling on the door with all my might. I didn't even realize that if I didn't lose my pull on the door, at least momentarily, Rena wouldn't be able to pull her fingers out, and that's why the door wasn't closing.
本当に痛いの、ケイチくん。
I don't like this! I don't like this!
悪ふざけが過ぎたなら謝るよ。
It didn't care one bit for her apology. No matter how much she apologized, it didn't change any of what she'd done up until now. It didn't change anything.
痛いの。ごめんなさい。
Rena couldn't even leave if she wanted because I trapped her fingers. Rena's white fingers had become deep red and were no longer even squirming.
ごめんなさい。
I feel sick. Rena's apologies were occasionally twisted with pain, but like a broken record, she was intent on repeating it over and over. Go away, go away, go away. Stop it! I pulled on the door even harder. Finally, Rena's fingers were somehow able to slip from their imprisonment in the doorway. The moment that happened, the door closed soundly, and I could hear a thud of Rena falling on her butt on the other side. I locked the door immediately. I made a loud clunk, voicing my rejection to Rena.
ごめんなさい。ケイチくん。ごめんなさい。ここを開けて。ケイチくん。
Why? Rena leaned against the door, apologizing profusely and nothing else. After confirming that I was sufficiently sealed off from her, I tugged away from the entryway. On the other side, I could still hear Rena's echoing apology. I'm sorry, those pitiful words that would have been forever seeking my forgiveness. I didn't feel bad about this at all, but that wasn't out of any sort of malice. I felt sort of a hazy sense of relief I was able to escape from Rena. Before Mion had threatened me at the doorway, saying there was nothing she didn't know. And just now, at the same place, Rena told me the same thing. My feeble attempts to disguise the fact my parents weren't home had served no purpose from the start. I should have just pretended to be out, not even opened the door. My meager plans hadn't helped at all. In Hinamizawa, it was impossible to outwit them. Even though I was on the other side of the door, I wanted to get as far away from Ren as possible. One step, two steps. With each one, her sniveling apologies became more distant. I spurted up the stairs and dove into my room. As you would expect, I was finally no longer able to hear Rena repeating her endless apology. Diving into my bed, I was startled by the hard lump I felt. There was something in my bed? It was the receiver. Finally remembered. I was in the middle of a call with Oishi-san. Looking at the clock, apparently not much time had passed since I went downstairs. Could it be that my clock had run out of batteries? I had talked to Rena for so long. How did almost no time pass? Well, the hand on the clock was ticking forward 1 second as usual. As I pulled the still warm receiver to my ear, time which felt frozen began moving once again.
もしもし、大石さん、お待たせしてすみませんでした。
いえいえ、大してお待ちしていませんよ。
It became apparent that the amount of time had passed between myself and Oishi-san was different. Over the phone, I could hear an energetic voice from a sports program or something. It drove home just how far away Oishi-san really was.
今、レナが来ました。
遊びに来たんですか?
I wasn't confident I could coherently explain the situation to Oishi-san, but I didn't need to right now. Right now, I needed to know about Rena. That's right, I was planning to ask Oishi-san more about Rena, but Rena's little visit had interrupted the conversation. What was true, what was false, I couldn't tell. The one thing I knew was a single grim reality that Rena was suspicious. I might be able to figure something out if I asked Oishi-san about her. Up until now, I'd regretted it when I'd forced myself to ask about things that I was better off not knowing. But looking at that way, you could say I'd hit rock bottom. Rock bottom? Rock bottom? We're at the bottom of the freaking Mariana Trench at this point. Dude! There's no possible way I could feel any more regret than I did right now. No, rather I wanted to know if there was anything beyond this I would regret more. Forget about tomorrow. It wasn't out of the realm possibility for something to happen tonight. I wanted to know everything I could. I was absolutely not going to die like this. Not without knowing anything. I definitely won't.
竜宮レナさんのことですか？調べましたよ。まあ簡単には。
I understood that Oishi-san was talking in circles. A bit meant that he dug so deep it'd be hard to discuss with you since you're a friend.
その簡単な全てを知りたいんです。
あなたが聞いて面白いような話はありませんよ。
Can you just explain what just happened? Tell her that she's like psychotic.
大石さん、
I spoke as calmly as possible to Oishi-san, who continued to avoid the issue. And then I said it.
竜宮レナは怪しいと思っています。過去の事件がたとえお社様のたたりによるものだったにせよ、竜宮レナは関わっています。
レナさんが怪しいと思える具体的な証拠があるのですか？
The manner in which Oishi-san spoke became very firm. Do you have some sort of proof? That was him talking as a detective.
状況証拠だけです。
そうですか。
I could tell even over the phone how disappointed Oishi-san was. Pulling the on the fishing line when he's feeling a bite, only to reel in the bait. Disappointed but ready to cast the line once more. That's how it seemed.
大石さん、目に見える証拠がなければ動けないんですか？
What I meant was, you can't come save me without proof. If I stuck that barb in there. If Oishi-san loved roundabout ways of saying things, he understood me just fine.
大丈夫ですよ、前原さん。あなたは私が守ります。
That was not the least bit reassuring. Oishi-san was just using me to continue his investigation. I was just going to get killed, and my corpse would be an important piece of evidence. That's all I was to him.
大石さんの捜査は俺の生死と無関係でしょうが、俺は死ねば終わりなんです。
Oishi-san went silent on the other end of the line. That may have been too blunt, but I didn't care. All I needed to relay to Oishi-san that I was currently in a very dangerous position.
だから話してください、レナのこと。サトシは転校しました。多分俺もそれほど遠くない将来、レナの言う転校をするでしょう。ですが大石さんには俺の死体を見つけることもできないでしょうね。現にサトシの死体だってまだ見つけられてない。
前原さん、どうか落ち着いて。
I was already suppressing my agitation even without Oishi-san having to tell me. It wouldn't solve anything if I continued to scream about my mistrust in the police. It would seem that I could only depend on myself and the bat Satoshi left behind to protect myself. Then at least I wanted to know what happened before Rana transferred schools.
つまらない話になるのは覚悟の上ですね。
Okay. I know this is probably kind of an awkward time, but like, this is going really long. I feel like I need to take a break. I'm gonna lose impact. I'm also like kind of overwhelmed. And like, I guess this is one of those ones that like probably is like, I'm probably getting close to the end, but it's gonna be like 2 hours long if I don't. I should have stopped a while ago, but I couldn't. So if you'll forgive me, I'm gonna go ahead and stop it here. It just might mean that we might have like a bit of an, like it might, I'm guessing we're gonna get to the end of this and we're gonna have the tips and then we're gonna start the next part, but I feel like that'll probably be okay. It's like, again, I could go on longer, but I have a feeling this conversation is gonna be another like 20-30 minute one at least, if not longer. And I need to breathe. So let's stop here, even if it's kind of awkward, and just enjoy ourselves for now while we're breathing, right? Because that freaking seems unlikely to be continuing. Fetch me. But hey, I appreciate you. Thank you so much for being here today. Thank you so much for joining me on the channel, for being a part of this journey and being able to share this with me. Yeah, this has been something. Been really something. Really enjoying it, but holy crap. I really am glad that you're here though, and that you're able to share this with me. Hopefully we can continue to see some, exciting things to come. We'll be able to find these solutions, and I hope Keiichi survives. I'm not convinced he will, but I hope he will. But I kind of feel bad for Rena. Like, she's definitely stalking him at the very least. She's definitely not healthy in the mind. But like, getting her fingers slammed like that must have been really painful. Really, really painful. Like, I'd be surprised if she didn't have broken bones. So, yeah. Anyway, moving on. Thank you so much. We're doing a bit of an experiment. You might have noticed last week, somebody did, that we have customized captions on the channel. I'm trying to experiment with something. I'll go into detail later. We just need to see if this is something we can kind of do in perpetuity and figure things out. But I'm hoping that I can do, if I can't, the problem is I can't offer a bunch of much compensation, but if people are willing to help me with things like having good subtitles in the systems, that's something that I can kind of do, but like I just don't have much more time. I already put most of my time into, like, most of my free time is into recording and editing as it is. And the only other way I could make sure I could have that quality is if I stepped back my recording schedule. So it's either I've got to find ways to outsource. I either keep things exactly the way they are. I outsource to try and improve the channel, but like in ways that like are within my means, or I step back the content schedule and give myself extra time so I can actually edit every little detail, including the captions. So I'm experimenting with that, because the big problem is that like the channel doesn't make a ton of compensation. Like thankfully through the support of members and patrons, I make some, but I just don't know if it's like enough that I can like really justify like I've got to figure out like what people are comfortable with. I've got to try and make sure it's all safe and above board. I don't want to be like undercutting people or like robbing them of their time, and that's the biggest struggle. Is it seems like it takes a long time, and I don't want to be like making people feel like it's not like I'm wasting their time when they could be spending it on like their own pursuits, right? I'd love to be able to hire people, but I just don't have the means to do that right now. And so it sucks, because like it was wonderful the last having like the subtitles. It was so nice, and I want to make sure that I compensate that kind of work, but I just don't know if I can. So I'm still trying to work on that and trying to figure that out. I'm just looking for ways to improve the channel. I want to make it better, more approachable, more, you know, just more have more reach and be able to facilitate more people being able to enjoy it. So I don't know. We'll have to find out. Anyway, thank you so much for being here. I appreciate your patience, and hopefully you've enjoyed this episode as much as I enjoyed making it. Although I kind of need to go and like lay down for a bit, but I'm still pretty happy with it all. So thank you so much. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and until the next video you watch me, I've seen me next. I'll see you there.